Hello and welcome to the narrated PowerPoint and video for Chapter 3, Understanding People at Work, Individual Differences and Perception. I'm going to start by talking about the big picture. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that organizational behavior is all about relationships. We're talking about relationships between people and relationships between variables. You recognize that word from when you took statistics, when we talk about dependent variables, which depend on independent variables. You might think in terms of cause and effect, even though not all variables fit that. Sometimes they are correlated, right? Where when one goes up, the other comes down, or maybe when one goes up, the other one goes up, etc. You remember this stuff from statistics. Overall, though, the point that I want to make is that what we care about in organizational behavior is relationships. So let's talk about those dependent variables that we really care about in this particular course. Number one, what I would call 1A, is productivity or performance. And we're interested in two elements of this. The first is effectiveness. Effectiveness is all about the extent to which we achieve our goals. So when you graduate from SNC, whenever that might be, you will have deemed yourself effective if in fact you achieved, let's say, a GPA goal that you had for yourself or a time to degree goal that you had for yourself. Again, effectiveness is all about achievement of goals. Whereas efficiency, another element of productivity or performance, is meeting those goals at the lowest possible cost. So, were you able to achieve that GPA goal without having to exert, let's say, an extraordinary or inefficient amount of effort? Were you able to achieve that I want to graduate in X amount of time goal with, again, a minimum amount of effort? That's what efficiency is all about. The second dependent variable, what I would call 1B, is satisfaction. As it says here, this is a general attitude, it's not a behavior, toward one's job. It includes everything about our feelings toward our job, how satisfied we are with our boss, how satisfied we are with our coworkers, how satisfied we are with the job itself, how satisfied we are with our working conditions, how satisfied we are with opportunities to advance, to be promoted, to get raises, opportunities to be challenged, to solve problems. All of that fits into our overall job satisfaction. Now, rather than calling this the second dependent variable, you'll note that I said this is 1B, and that's because it aligns with our first one, performance, but not for the reasons that you might imagine. It is not the case that when you make people happy, they perform at a higher level. In other words, one of the causes of performance is not satisfaction. No. That is a common misunderstanding. Instead, the relationship works the other way, where when we perform at a high level, that causes us to be very satisfied. Imagine, for example, being part of a championship team. When you win that championship, that feels awesome. But it isn't feeling awesome that enables you to win that championship. Are you with me? These two very important dependent variables have a relationship, but again, it's not what most people imagine. Now, there's another reason to care about satisfaction that has nothing to do with performance, and that's because as human beings, we have an inherent right to be satisfied. the pursuit of happiness, if you will, to be pleased with our lives, to have good lives. And within organizations, as future leaders, part of your responsibility is enabling your people to be satisfied, not because of any relationship it might have to performance or any other dependent variable, but rather just because people deserve to be happy. And as a future leader, as a manager, you will be in a position to help make that a possibility. You won't be solely responsible for it, of course, but you will be able to do some things that will help your people to be satisfied. The third and fourth dependent variables, first is absenteeism here. That's when people don't show up to work. And the next is turnover, which can be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary meaning I quit. Involuntary meaning you're fired. Voluntary can also be I'm retiring. I've worked long enough. In either case, we're talking about permanent withdrawal from an organization. We're very interested in organizational behavior, about the things that cause absenteeism, the things that cause turnover. We're also interested in what absenteeism causes and what turnover causes. So we can think about these as dependent variables, but I want to give you a hint. We can also think about them as independent variables. So, for example, what are the things that cause people to be absent? What are the independent variables that might cause people to not show up to work? I'll bet you can think of several. Maybe one is somebody's sick. That would cause a person to not come to work. Maybe another is a person is bored at their job. Still another might be a person believing that it doesn't matter if they show up to work. It's not like anybody will notice. We could do this same analysis with turnover. What are the things that we think cause people to quit? Well, I can tell you the number one reason why people quit their jobs. Can you guess? All right, I'll tell you. The number one reason why people quit their jobs? Their boss. They can't stand their boss. They hate their boss. Their boss is someone who does not have their respect. So they bail. They say, I'm out of here because I cannot work for this person anymore. Another dependent variable that we care about is deviant workplace behavior. Basically, when people do things they're not supposed to do, like stealing. What do you think the number one thing is that people steal from their workplace? I'll give you just a bit to think about that. You have some ideas? How many of you were thinking something like office supplies? I'll bet quite a few of you, but that's not the number one thing. What might it be? All right, I'll tell you. The number one thing that people steal from work? Time. They steal time. How do we do that? Well, we do that when we look at our phone for personal messages, text our friends, go online, surf the web, anything but work. Chat up our coworkers with, gossip. Again, things that aren't helping us to perform. That's stealing time. I think we've probably all done it. Well, what we're interested in organizational behavior is, what is it that would cause a person to do this? I'm going to give you a hint. The number one reason why people steal time? They don't have a good job. And I'll tell you later in our chapters on motivation, that would be chapters 5 and 6, why having a good job matters so much and what a good job actually looks like. In the meantime, just be giving some thought to the sorts of things that might contribute to people doing things they shouldn't be doing. The final dependent variable that we're interested in is organizational citizenship behavior. This is sort of the opposite of deviant behavior in that here we're talking about something really positive that people do, where they go above and beyond what their job requires, where they do more than anyone is expecting them to do, not because they're getting paid, but for reasons that aren't necessarily apparent. Obviously, this is something we'd like to know more about. What is it that would cause someone to go above and beyond, to help out a coworker even when they don't need to stay longer than they need to maybe come in early, to take on a project that goes beyond their normal duties? What causes people to do this? Shifting away from talking about our dependent variables, I want to spend just a bit talking about the interactionist perspective. Very specifically, I want to talk about the role of fit. And there are 4 different kinds of fit. Your text talks at length about 2 of them. I'm going to talk about all 4. All 4 are relevant to you as a student who will be, at some point, going into the professional world. So let's walk through these 4. We're going to start at the highest level, person-vocation fit. A vocation, what is that? Well, that's your profession. When we talk about person-vocation fit, we're talking about finding a good fit between your interests, what do you find exciting, your abilities, what are you good at, your values, what really matters to you, and your personality. What are you like on the day-to-day? Trying to find a fit between all 4 of those and a profession. Now, I'm going to use myself as a quick example of this. My profession is professor. How might we talk about the fit between my interests, abilities, values, and personality and the profession of professor? Well, I'll start with interests. I'm very interested in all things organizational. I'm extremely interested in why people do what they do in organizations. I'm also interested in why organizations behave the way they do and how they all interact with one another. This has been interesting to me probably since I was a kid, before I even had the jargon, the terminology to understand that I was super interested in people and why they did what they did. In terms of abilities, as a professor, I need to be able to do things like write well, read fast, present in a meaningful fashion. Those are abilities that I think I pretty much have. Values. Well, one of the values that I hold very strongly is that I care deeply about helping people self-actualize. It's kind of a weird phrase. Basically, that means helping people be all they can be at any given moment in time, understanding that we're all works in progress. That's really important to me. It's also really important to me that I have a profession where I can help people. It's also really important to me that I have a profession where I can make a difference in the world. Finally, with respect to personality, I am the kind of person who is conscientious, meaning that I get things done, I'm dependable, I'm reliable, I finish things on time, I'm organized. I'm also a social introvert, which means I'm really good at spending lots of time alone, which is what professors have to do when we do our research, when we're prepping for class, when we're grading things. But I also need to be able to turn around and be outgoing and interact with people. So being a social introvert works really great for being a professor. Basically, those 4 elements, my interests, abilities, values, and personality, form a good fit with the profession of professor. Now, you might give some thought to yourself as you think about what's interesting to you, what are you good at, what really matters to you, and then finally your personality. Okay, well, what professions, what vocations are out there that might be a good fit for that? A second kind of fit is person-organization fit. You want to make sure that you end up in an organization that's a good fit for you. What are we specifically talking about? Well, your values, your beliefs, again, your personality, and then the values, norms, and culture of that particular organization. Again, I'll use myself as an example. I want you thinking about yourself and the organizations of which you've been a part. I'm going to use myself relative to St. Norbert College. So, what are my values, my beliefs, my personality? Well, honestly, I believe deeply in the mission of St. Norbert College. I believe in things like radical hospitality. I believe in things like making a difference in our community. I was raised Catholic, but it's not so much about being Catholic as it is understanding that we are called as human beings to care for others. I also believe strongly in our liberal arts mission. I believe that the best professionals, I'm teaching in business, obviously, the best professionals are people who are well-rounded, who understand the world in which they live, who can frankly talk about more than just their jobs, who have interests that go beyond what they do at work. As I think about, for example, all of us having to self-isolate during this crisis, what is it that's keeping us going? Well, quite honestly, it's the arts, right? The people who make our lives worth living are the artists of the world, the musicians, the people in theater, the people who give us beautiful things to look at, perhaps through photography or their drawings. All the people who make social media a possibility. These are all artists of different kinds, right? So the liberal arts is something that enables us to think better, to live better. I strongly believe in that. And it just so happens that St. Norbert aligns really well. The values, the norms, the culture of St. Norbert align really well with the things that matter to me. So I would say there's a terrific fit between me, the person, and the organization, St. Norbert College. The third kind of fit is person-group fit. So this is the fit between you and all those people you're working with, their work styles, their skills, their goals. Again, you see a bunch of dimensions listed there. I'll use myself one more time as an example. Me and the people with whom I work, my colleagues, particularly my colleagues in the Schneider School. Quite honestly, when I first came to St. Norbert College, not quite 4 years ago in 2016, one of the great attractive aspects of St. Norbert College was the people that I would be working with. Again, not only in the Schneider School, but all around campus, the awesome faculty and staff, all of the people who make St. Norbert College the amazing place it is, the students. All of these people are part of my work group, if you care to think about it that way, my community. And these are all people that I find myself fitting with really well because we're hardworking, we care deeply about what we do, we are great at laughter, we enjoy learning, we, again, really believe in community. It's a terrific fit for me. Finally, you want to find a fit between you and your job. And when I say job, notice how this is different from profession. Here we're talking about the very specific demands of that job. In my case, as an example, as a professor, I am responsible for teaching 3 courses per semester. I teach a total of 24 credits in a year's time. That's part of my job. I also have specific requirements around scholarship. And finally, I have specific requirements around service, the kinds of things I'm expected to do to serve our community, the St. Norbert College community, the greater Green Bay area community, my professional community, etc. So the very specific tasks. And then what you're aligning with are your specific skills and what you're good at and what you want to do and how all of that fits in with the specifics of the job. I love teaching. So having the opportunity to teach as much as I do, for me, is terrific. It's a good fit for me. So I've talked about 4 different kinds of fit. You want to think about yourself relative to each of those kinds of fit as you go forward in life, thinking about what vocation or profession do you want to be in. Now, recognize that you don't have to pick something that will be forever. It's very possible that over the course of your lifetime, you in fact will have multiple professions. And that's okay because, of course, you change over time. So you want to find a good fit between you and a profession. You definitely want to find a good fit between you and an organization. You want to be proud of the organization for which you work. You want to believe in its mission, what it does. It's also really important to find a great fit with the people with whom you work. There's almost nothing worse than working with people you can't stand. In fact, research tells us that the number one reason why people stay working at their jobs is because they love the people with whom they work. So assessing that fit is important. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle is how well do you fit with the specific job that you're being asked to do? Of course, you want a job where you feel like, hey, yeah, this is something I can do. You also want a job where you're challenged, where you don't necessarily already know how to do everything, because the last thing you want is to be bored at work. Give careful thought to each of these 4 different kinds of fit. That brings us to the end of part 1 for this chapter. Thanks for listening, and get ready for part 2.